evening, I'm Katerina Georgieva. Here's what's making news right now.
I'm not sure what'll happen next. Council will certainly be discussing the issue when we meet.
We're fulfilling our promise at 10 cents a litre. It's 5.7 cents. And you know, the people of Ontario and across the country have just been getting gouged day in and day out.
Things seem to be stabilizing a little bit now, thankfully, and we're starting to reopen up some of our services, increase our capacities, things like that, thankfully.
Thanks for joining us. We begin tonight with disturbing allegations involving an advisor with the Greater Essex County District School Board. Michael Hampton Carter, who was also a sports coach and mentor in the community, has been charged with 2 counts of sexual assault and 2 counts of sexual exploitation. 2 victims came forward to Windsor Police last month. Both were under the age of 18. They reported they'd been sexually assaulted in January. Police say they determined Carter had been communicating with both victims in person and through an app prior to the incidents. And here's what we know about the suspect. Officials say Carter worked within multiple schools at the high school level. Police add he's been a sports coach in the area for several years. Carter was arrested on April 2nd. Bail was granted, and he is expected back in court at the end of the month. And anyone with information is asked to contact police. Meanwhile, the public school board would not grant us an interview today. They would only say the board is aware of the charges made against an employee and they have been fully cooperating with police. The Ontario government has announced it is speeding up completion of 5 new hydro transmission lines by the end of the decade. They're expected to bring more power to our region, most importantly for industrial expansion like the new EV battery plant. But as Dale Molnar reports, residents in Chatham-Kent and Lakeshore are still not satisfied with the route one of the lines will take.
These projects will power the Stellantis LGES battery plant, the growing manufacturing sector here in Windsor, and the booming agri-food industry in Leamington and across Essex County, and many job creators that are yet to come.
However, landowners in Chatham-Kent and Lakeshore are still trying to fight the proposal to run the Chatham to Lakeshore line through Comber.
And if somebody came to your door and said, hey, I'm going to put this obstruction in your backyard, and you don't get a say in that, that's not right. That's not fair.
They say Hydro One should use existing corridors.
Our proposal would be that some of these routes can be consolidated and integrated.
Hydro One says they are still going to consult with affected landowners and groups, but Lakeshore Mayor Tom Bain wasn't even invited to the news conference. Lakeshore and Chatham-Kent both want the power lines, but have been trying to convince Hydro One to alter the Chatham to Lakeshore route.
So we've had several meetings, and they've made a lot of their explanations on why they need it there, some of it being expense, but just surprised that we didn't get the invite today.
2 new lines are proposed to run from London to Lakeshore and 1 from Sarnia to Chatham. A new line is expected to run from Comber to Windsor. That will bring power into the battery plant, but it's not clear when that line will be built. A representative from Stellantis says the battery plant will be running in 2024, but the line from Chatham to Lakeshore isn't expected to be operational until the end of 2025. CBC is attempting to get clarification on whether the new lines will be ready in time for the battery plant to begin operations. Dale Molnar, CBC News, Lakeshore.
The Ford government is bringing in a temporary cut to Ontario's gas tax. The Premier says he is making good on a promise from the last election, even though the tax cut won't take effect until after this year's election. Queen's Park reporter Mike Crawley has the story.
Filling up these days sure hits you in the wallet, and hard enough that when you're at the pumps today, you might not remember this election promise from nearly 4 years ago.
We're lowering the tax on gas by 10 cents a litre.
Until now, Premier Doug Ford got only partway there. Scrapping Ontario's cap-and-trade system knocked off 4.3 cents a litre. Today, with prices near a record high, plans are announced for a new cut to the gas tax, 5.7 cents.
We're fulfilling our promise at 10 cents a litre.
There are a couple of catches. It doesn't kick in until July 1st, after Election Day.
July's not soon enough.
And it's only slated to last until the end of the year.
Only for 6 months still?
It's only for 6 months.
Come on, government.
We're going to give people a break for a minimum of 6 months. Again, putting money back into people's pockets.
The tax cut would mean on a typical fill-up of 50 liters, you'd save a little under $3.
It's a good gesture, but it might be lost ultimately on massively higher prices than last year.
And how about for people who don't own a car or who mostly get around on transit?
Drivers have gotten a break, and now transit riders need a break too.
Sheila Pisey-Allen is with TTC Riders, a transit advocacy group.
It's not fair to only give a discount to car drivers, especially because people who drive cars are more likely to have higher incomes.
Factoring in everyone with and without cars, the tax cut is expected to save the average household $65 this year. For the government, it means nearly $650 million less in revenue.
This government has had 4 years to lower the gas prices for folks and bring in this legislation. And on the eve of an election, at the 11th hour, we see the government continuing to make these election promises when they had years to deliver on this.
It is the season of election promises. All the parties are rolling some out now, and that will only heat up once the election campaign begins, exactly 1 month from today. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
And while the Ford government is focused on the gas tax, the leader of the NDP is looking at mental health services. Andrea Horwath was in Windsor today touting her party's universal mental health plan. A woman speaking at the event said the current system is, quote, fragmented. In 2019, she was diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder after she'd been assaulted by her partner. She was only recently placed in a program to get help.
It should not be that hard to get help, especially when you are looking for it so desperately. I had a really difficult time prior to COVID to even get a phone call as opposed to an in-person. So it took a pandemic to create a little bit more avenues for people to get help in other ways. And I'm a huge advocate for what Andrea is messaging that she's going to bring to this city.
The NDP plan would bring services not currently covered by the Ontario Health Insurance Plan under its umbrella. Horwath says the plan would be implemented very quickly if they were elected to form government. And it would include things like psychotherapy and counseling services, and would aim to expand publicly funded mental health services, as well as increase accessibility. Horwath says the plan would cost just over $1 billion. Ontario launched a regulated market for online casinos and esports betting sites today. It's the first province in Canada to legalize and tax these platforms. But as Philip de Montagny explains, some insiders and experts are expressing concerns.
Ontario is hoping it's going to be a huge new revenue source, regulating and taxing the $1 billion online gambling industry. This Toronto startup offers virtual casino games and sports betting, one of the few homegrown operators now licensed and allowed to advertise legally.
We have a bit of a home court advantage, we feel, so it being that market is obviously critical for us.
Big global gambling sites like Bet365 and FanDuel are also joining the party, with hundreds of online games now certified by the provincial regulator. Now that they're legit, there's concern some Ontarians may not play within their limits.
Most people have a really bad understanding of random chance, and so they think, for example, if they keep playing, they're due to win.
Researchers say all the flashy ads and easy access may draw at-risk players.
With the increase in accessibility of gambling games in this way, there should also be an increase in accessibility of responsible gambling tools and services to these players.
Beyond passive measures like including links to addiction resources on their sites, FanDuel Canada says it's being proactive.
On our app, there are a lot of tools for players to be able to self-regulate around game bets, length of time, wager limits.
Licensed online operators are being taxed by Ontario 20% of their earnings, far less than brick-and-mortar casinos at 55%.
It's not fair. We want to compete. We want iGaming. We want it to be a level playing field.
Legalizing online betting in Ontario could draw some customers away from casinos. An industry report says that could result in hundreds of millions of dollars in lost tax revenue each year for Queen's Park. Philippe Demontigny, CBC News, Toronto.
Condemnation is deepening over the dead civilians found this weekend in Ukraine. World leaders are promising an international response. And where the discoveries were made, the search and investigation by Ukrainian individuals is underway. From Lviv, Ukraine, the CBC's Katie Simpson has this report. And just a warning, it includes images viewers may find disturbing.
The work to uncover the full scope of the assault on Busha remains brutal, made even more painful by the fact the work is just beginning. Ukrainian soldiers look for unexploded mines, hazards, and of course, more bodies. They were joined today by their visibly distraught president. These are war crimes, Volodymyr Zelensky says, and they will be recognized by the world as genocide. The world is just starting to get a better look at the violence in the south. Soldiers find bodies in the streets of Mariupol. The mayor says some 140,000 people are still trapped here. Survivors dig graves for the dead. The sound of shelling echoes nearby. We've been burying bodies for the second day in a row, he says. There are lots of children in the yard. We decided to remove bodies so they won't decay, to do the right thing. Air raid sirens are so common in the western part of the country, people barely react anymore. Local leaders are ramping up their protections in the city of Lviv, opening a new support center for soldiers who serve this part of the country. They're asking for donations, money, helmets, and body armor. I'm wondering if I can get your reaction to the stories and the images that we're seeing coming out of Kyiv and the cities around it. The member of parliament for Lviv says he's never seen such harrowing images of violence. Through an interpreter, he says he is confident Ukraine will not be defeated.
We are going to pay revenge for every life lost in this area, and every Russian boot is going to leave this country being killed in action.
Lviv is a relatively safe place, but because Russia is so unpredictable, there are fears it could be targeted if the military changes its tactics. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Lviv.
On a visit to Helsinki for talks with her Finnish counterpart, Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Mélanie Joly added her voice to the international outrage.
These acts of terror won't go unpunished. We will support the International Criminal Court as they're investigating about the war crimes and crimes against humanity that have been committed and are committed in Ukraine by Russia.
Joly said today's discussions focused on ways to support Ukraine, and she said Vladimir Putin is attacking democracy and world stability. The dismantling of a Ukrainian monument in Jackson Park raised alarm within the local Ukrainian community. With the ongoing war, some worried that it was the work of vandals. Lately, instead of standing tall, the granite slab has been lying in the grass, chopped into pieces. But the city stresses that it's not vandalism. Rather, the monument has been intentionally taken apart to be refurbished. The community erected the monument 17 years ago to mark Ukraine's Great Famine, when an estimated 5 million people starved to death. Windsor's downtown mission now has a permanent leader at the helm. Rukshini Punea-Gulen is now the executive director after serving in the interim capacity since October. She has a lot of work ahead of her. The mission needs to be out of its Victoria Avenue location by the end of June, so they'll need a new building. But they're waiting on a city homelessness report before deciding where to go next.
Just to give us a little bit of time to kind of regroup, get stable as an organization, become maybe more financially stable and prudent as well. And then from here, once we find out what our shelter system should look like for the community. We can work with our community partners at the city and at the other shelters to move forward and hopefully find a location that will serve our guests.
Over the next several months, the mission will be moving its day programming from the Victoria location to the Olette Avenue site. The mission sold its historic building with hopes of moving to the former downtown library, but they couldn't secure a mortgage. So they transferred the library to a developer 2 years ago. And at the time, former executive director Ron Dunn ruffled some feathers on council for the decision. The new exec says one of her priorities is to work collaboratively with the city of Windsor. A Leamington boy is making a name for himself in the world of go-karting. And he is only 11, but he's already won 4 Canadian championships, and he raced in the World Championships in Italy last year. And we caught up with him and his dad to talk about the ride so far.
Last year, we had a very successful year racing in Canada. He won three championships throughout the year, and then an additional 3 Canadian championships.
So we spent our first few years racing in Canada, and I think I've proven myself enough to my dad that I'm able to race in the UK and put in all that time and effort for it.
The go-karts that we're racing right now are very, very competitive and I guess technologically advanced. So this past weekend, for example, the top speed they were hitting was about 110 kilometers per hour.
My 2 goals would be IndyCar or Formula 1. I don't want to do NASCAR because it's just driving in a circle. So it gets kind of boring after a little bit, I think. You just got to stay focused on the race the whole time. Every mistake really costs you, because if you make a mistake and you fall back, it's really tough on you and you have to catch back up.
It's a great opportunity. For us, we're obviously focused on achieving as much as we can in motorsports. Hopefully, if all the pieces fall into place over the years, you can make a living out of racing a car of whatever type it is, even a NASCAR, if that's what's going to pay your bills.
Quite a bit of new friends here in England. They kind of think my accent's funny and I think their accent's funny. And yeah, they kind of ask, like, what is Canada? What's the weather like down there? I say it's about the same as England sometimes. Sometimes it gets a little warmer.
Let's take a live look outside there. The week ahead is going to be a wet one. Chance of showers for most of the week, and Colette will be here right after the break, and she will break it all down for us. Stay with us. Welcome back. You know the slogan, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. Well, it's been feeling that way lately in Windsor. So just take a look at some of today. A blast of snow in the middle of the day, mixed in with rain early in the day, and coolish temperatures like snow and then rain and then drizzle. Colette, is this really April? Like, what is going on here?
I know, that feels like April Fool's Day, right? Doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and this is the kind of thing, in terms of the impact this system's having on us, it's not that significant in terms of it's not that strong, and much more significant stateside, and yet it does that, right? It's just enough to kind of shock the system. And what's interesting is that I'm here to tell you we're actually going to see less of these extremes where you have snow and then you have, rain, you have temperatures way above seasonal and then way below. We're getting there, like mid-spring, we start to get a little bit more consistency. The current temperatures, they look like this, a little cooler there, that pocket towards London, and the radar showing what is mostly in the form of liquid precipitation, rainfall, although there still is going to be a bit of mixing for areas through the overnight tonight. We're kind of seeing a bit of a break in this, and then we will still have some showers and then some gradual clearing as we go through the overnight hours. So we will actually be able to then wake up with some sun, and that's before the next system comes in and will be having an impact on us. So for now, a little bit of surrounding areas getting a bit of scattered shower activity and some isolated showers kind of going through. But once we get past midnight, that's when we'll begin to see things drying up, but then also clearing as we get towards morning. Now, I will caution you, there'll be a few areas where there's going to be some fog. And so it could be, it'll be patchy, but it could be a little bit dense in areas. There's some of that nice clearing so we can get into some of the sun. And then look at this, as I roll us forward to Wednesday, the next system coming in. So that cloud deck will be in pretty early on Wednesday. So generally it's going to be overcast, but the rain itself will take a little more time to get here. It'll start off in the afternoon with some light showers, but then we'll get into something a little more significant into the evening hours, and then that wave goes through. And so we are going to have some ups and downs. They're just gentler. Not a whole lot of rain to come, 2 to 5 millimeters in terms of what we're seeing there. But here are those temperatures overnight. Once we get some of that clearing after midnight, that's why the temperature is a little bit cooler there for Leamington and for Windsor, and holding the moisture, but also then holding in some of the heat from the day and some slightly milder temperatures then for Sarnia and towards London. But a look towards tomorrow, up to 13 degrees once we can get that sun coming back in. There's some of that rain again. Not early Wednesday, it should be dry. It comes in later for Wednesday. And these temperatures, nice to see some double digits, but see how they're not terribly extreme. We're not talking about 2s and 3s for daytime highs in there, which is nice to see.
It is very nice to see. Thanks so much, Colette.
You're welcome.
And when we come back, many of us are trying to do our parts to be more environmentally friendly. Well, one company is building green toys for children, and we're going to tell you all about them right after the break. Welcome back. Finding a payphone is a lot harder than it used to be. And in the Alberta community of Okotoks, the search is about to get even tougher. There are 2 in town right now, and at the end of the month, there will be 2 less. The CBC's Helen Pike has the story.
The number you have reached is not in service.
Nearby businesses say this payphone in Okotoks hasn't worked in years, but Beth Cruz has a view from the window of Better Than Home Coin Laundry, and she says every now and then someone gives it a go.
The younger kids pick it up and see if it works, and then laughing at how big and bulky and how out of date it looks on the building.
TELUS is removing the town's last 2 payphones on April 25th. The company says part of the problem is these relics often break. There's few parts to repair them, let alone experts around to find a fix. Combined, the 2 phones were used for 10 calls in the last year.
I carry my payphone in my pocket now, right?
Okotoks Mayor Tanya Thorne says these old machines bring back memories.
I'd have a dime in my shoe or in my coat pocket or whatever, because that was how I checked in or phoned to get a ride.
She says if there's a place to commemorate the payphone, that's something the town could get behind. Helen Pike, CBC News, Okotoks.
This next story shows how a big company is thinking small when it comes to the environment by developing green toys for children.
It's fantastic for Mega Bloks to have this opportunity to really sort of introduce children to these sustainable behaviors and sustainable ways of living at a very young age so that they grow up learning and knowing about these things.
Aimed at preschoolers, the new line of toys includes a solar farm, wind turbines, recycling trucks, and beehives. It's Mattel's first big line of toys made from certified carbon-neutral material. And that comes in part from the purchase of 500 metric tons of CO2 offsets from a forest conservation project right here in Canada. That is it for CBC Windsor News. For news anytime, you can always go to our website. We're at cbc.ca/Windsor. You can also find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.